They used my report to fire 80 people. So I rewrote the rules. I'm Graham Porter, 44, process optimization lead, meaning I turn human chaos into numbers executives can pretend to understand. I talk in ratios, they nod in bonuses. It's an arrangement that kept our company. Seabright Systems afloat for 12 fiscal years, 10 audits, 3 CEOs, and 1 merger that should have been left in the pitch deck where it belonged. The day it went sideways was a Tuesday. All bad Tuesdays start with pastries. We were in the multi-purpose auditorium, a phrase meaning windowless and anxious, rows of chairs, a projector that made everything look suspicious. Under the whitewash of the screen, my report sat there, Efficiency Review V2.2, shaved down to a glossy 90 slides. I wrote the thing, but I didn't recognize it. It was like seeing your own face in a funhouse mirror. Familiar bone structure, wrong intentions. Clara Young, HR director, 38, sharp suit, sharper elbows, smiled at the room of managers. Our restructuring is based on objective data, she said, tapping the clicker like it was a gavel. We are targeting an 18.7% redundancy in low-impact roles. This will save $3.2 million annually. People nodded because it's easier than thinking. Slide 90 arrived, a table of names. 80 people in patient rows. I knew most of them. I'd helped build metrics that kept them safe from arbitrary cuts, contextual KPIs, weighted contribution scores, stuff that means look beyond the easy target. In my original draft, there was a highlight yellow paragraph on every summary page. All reductions are contingent on compliance verification, case review, and written justification. Data is a compass, not a hammer. The paragraph was gone. The battering ram stayed. This approach, Clara said, comes directly from Graham's model. Heads turned. I felt my own name bounce off the drywall. I was a footnote turned culprit. It was so clean, I almost admired it. I stood, walked down the aisle, and stopped at the AV table where the handouts waited, still warm from the copier. Internal use only, the cover said, V2.2 in the corner. I thumbed the staple, careful not to bleed. Paper remembers everything. I looked at Clara. She tilted her chin with the serenity of someone who'd practiced that angle. Any questions, Graham? Just one, I said. Where did you put the disclaimer? A shadow crossed her expression, gone fast. We streamlined, she said. For clarity. Right? I said, and sat. Streamlined. It's what we call it when we remove the parts that prevent harm. By Thursday, the letters had gone out. I came to operations young and interested in proof. I liked systems because they didn't care about my opinions. Solve the process and morale improves by 12%. Fix the queue and turnaround drops from 41 hours to 26. Shriek less in meetings and escalations fall by 31%. Numbers weren't the enemy. They were just guilty by association with people who used them like pottery glaze, thin, shiny, hiding the cracks. I built my career like a patient bridge. You test load. You log stress. You document failure paths. It sounds romantic until you meet executives who only like bridges when they point somewhere they already wanted to go. Clara joined last spring. She had the look of someone who never perspired. HR had been languishing under a director who used the word family too much. Clara used liability with the affection other people reserve for pets. Within 6 weeks, she discovered $480,000 in misallocated compensation bands and cut the cake herself when accounting realigned the numbers. She didn't do small knives. When the macro turned and our largest client pushed payment terms from net 30 to net 90, the board wanted blood that didn't look like their own. So they looked at my models and saw a menu. I could have sent a fiery reply all, annotated every alteration, dragged metadata and intent across the virtual carpet. I could have stood up that Tuesday and said, "You are misusing my work." But I read my models for a living. The first rule is simple. Don't shout in the wrong room. People hear the echo, not the point. If you want justice, build it like infrastructure. I went home, pulled my original drafts, opened the admin panel of our document system, and followed the digital fingerprints. The V2.2 file had been created from my V2.1 base. Metadata said edited 11:43 p.m. by C. Young, 4 notes removed, 1 section reorganized. My 4 notes were the disclaimers requiring review, context, and written justification. They weren't suggestions. They were guardrails. I stared at the screen, then at the paper copy on my desk. The fluorescent ink of the internal use only stamp was still bright enough to glow. I held it to the lamp until the stamp became a small sun. Then I called the one person who didn't owe Clara a favor, Janice Holleran. Internal counsel, 50, Broadway villain voice, and a hobby of saying what other people whisper. She answered on the second ring. Talk. They used my report to cut 80 people. She exhaled a sound like a file drawer. Yes, I saw. You keeping score or planning moves? Both, I said. The guardrails were removed. Of course they were. Wheels roll better without them. Send me your metadata. I did. 3 minutes later, a ping. Micro message number 1. Janice, 10:14 p.m. They can remove your words. They can't remove the audit trail. Start drafting the policy you wish we had. Don't argue about V.2. Make V2.3 the trapdoor. The trapdoor. I liked the ambition of it. I liked it even more at 2 a.m. with coffee that could remove paint. I began to write. You can rewrite a policy like an engineer or like a litigant. Engineers tighten bolts. Litigants leave them visible on purpose. I chose both. Policy V2.3 was not a manifesto. It was math with manners, explicit criteria for job relatedness, adverse impact analysis, compensatory factors, and individual review. It required HR to prove business necessity when metrics disproportionately affected a protected group. It demanded case summaries signed by the decision maker. It tied every reduction to documented workload flows and banned using provisional KPIs for permanent decisions. It said without italics that no layoff could be justified solely by a model score. It included near the top a sentence that sounded like me. Numbers are maps. Maps do not cancel towns. I wrote for 2 weeks, nights and weekends. I had 112 pages by the end, 27 references, 6 appendices. I added a banner on the title page, effective only upon compliance board review. It wasn't a magic spell. It was a tripwire. If anyone tried to waive it in court as policy, they'd have to admit it needed board oversight. I named it internal use only because I wanted the phrase to follow it like a dog. When I was done, I uploaded it to the internet and marked it draft. I emailed one person, micromessage number 2, Graham Janice. 1:07 a.m. V2.3 is in the drawer, labeled booby-trapped. Needs a key named compliance. She replied, Janice, 1:19 a.m. Don't announce it. Let gravity do the work. And Graham, don't get noble and get fired. If you need to leave, leave clean. I wrote my resignation on a Friday. 2 paragraphs. I didn't mention Clara. I did mention the 1,476 unpaid hours I'd poured into the systems over 8 years and said I'd be sending a consulting proposal if they wanted help migrating them. Then I went home, put the paper copy of V2.3 on my bookshelf between a paperback on Six Sigma and a dog-eared Wittgenstein I only pretended to read. The fluorescent stamp winked when the sun hit it. I slept. For once, it took. 3 weeks later, I was at a coffee place that took 6 minutes to pour an espresso because it had opinions about water. My phone vibrated so hard it walked across the saucer. Subject, Jane D. et al. V. Seabright Systems, from Holleran. Janice time 8:03 a.m. The email was short. Micromessage number 3, Janice 8:03 a.m. They're suing. 12 plaintiffs. Unfair termination and disparate impact. Opposing counsel just motioned to introduce, wait for it, Policy V2.3. Call me, I called. She picked up mid-stride. You built a lighthouse, she said. People swam to it. You sure we want that in court? I asked. It's a draft. It's the best kind, she said. It says we knew better. It says we had a path and ignored it. The board will hate that. The judge won't. Clara? She's doing algebra on a napkin to calculate how much of this sticks to her. Show up. Where? Downtown. 2 p.m. Bring the paper copy if you still have it. Jury's like ink. Janice, it's a preliminary hearing. Exactly. We teach them the words before the music starts. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and panic. Corporate counsel sat at our table looking like a navy of identical suits. Clara sat behind them, her posture a confession of nothing. I took a bench near the back, set my V2.3 binder on my lap, and watched the plaintiffs file in. I recognized 2. Helen from accounts, meticulous, funny, and Luis from warehouse, once brought me tamales on a Sunday during a system migration because he thought I looked hungry. The judge was a woman whose gaze could sand paint. Opposing counsel stood. Your Honor, We move to admit as Exhibit B a document titled Policy V2.3, Internal Use Only, an internal draft authored by Mr. Porter, demonstrating the company's awareness of appropriate legal safeguards they chose not to implement prior to terminating 80 employees. Corporate counsel objected. It's a draft, not policy. Opposing counsel smiled like a magician ready to reveal the rabbit. We agree. That's our point, Janice rose. Your Honor, corporate does not contest that the draft exists or that it contains legally sound safeguards. We contest only the inference that it was adopted, which it was not. We welcome the court's review of the document solely to establish that best practices were known to HR. Clara's jaw twitched. The judge looked down. Admitted for the limited purpose of showing knowledge, she said, tapping her pen. Mr. Porter, are you present? I stood. My voice worked. Yes, Your Honor. Approach. This is your document? Yes. You wrote this sentence? She read, No layoff can be justified solely by a model score. I did. Then why, she asked, did the company proceed otherwise? I let the silence do what I brought it for. Because they curtailed the policy before it could be reviewed. By whom? The compliance board. And yet 80 people were laid off. Yes. She nodded once like someone who had already known. Ms. Young, she said, turning past the counsel table. Clara rose, questions fresh on her lips, answers rotting behind her teeth. The judge continued. I'm ordering a preliminary injunction on any further reductions at Seabright Systems until a lawful policy is in force. Additionally, I am instructing parties to prepare for an adverse impact analysis review and to discuss restitution frameworks. Court resumes in 10 days. Gavels aren't as loud in real life, but the whispers are. Outside, reporters waited the way birds wait for crumbs. I kept moving. Janice caught me by the elbow. That went about as well as a hurricane can, she said. What now? Now, she said, the board will remember your phone number. She was right by 9:40 p.m. The board meeting took place in a smaller room than Ego would recommend. 7 people around a table that had opinions about wood grain. They'd invited me by email that used the phrase independent advisor 3 times and liability exposure twice. You can map a company by the words it repeats. The chair, a man with stock options for dimples, cleared his throat. Mr. Porter, thank you for coming. We would like to understand why V2.3 was not... He glanced at a paper like he was asking it permission. Properly escalated. Because escalation requires someone to pull the cord, I said. Calm as an elevator. I attached the cord to the compliance board review process. HR took scissors to it. Ms. Young, the chair said, turning. Clara sat 2 seats down. She looked unshaken. She preferred not to display weather. We were operating under timelines and budget constraints. We streamlined. I laid the binder on the table. The fluorescent internal use only stamp looked juvenile on all that tasteful oak. You removed 4 lines, I said. 4 lines don't save a policy, she said. They save people, I said. Which is the point? Another director, a woman who had built 3 companies and left 2 marriages, leaned forward. Mr. Porter, what would it take to put a lawful policy in place within 6 weeks? A weekend, I said. And power. Define power. Authority to implement V3.0, built on V2.3 with enforcement teeth. Direct reporting to the compliance board, not HR. Mandated training for all managers. A structured employee impact review, 20 minutes per case, minimum 3 reviewers documented. A clause drawing a line between temporary KPIs and permanent actions. And a clear rule, no layoffs during pending audits. You want a number? $200,000 for rollout, $35,000 quarterly to maintain. The chair steepled his fingers over ethics he hadn't purchased yet. And you, Mr. Porter, are you available? I'd quit without drama. I'd started a small consultancy because I've learned that sometimes the only way to do clean work is to send invoices for it. If we sign the right paper, I said, what would that paper say? The chair asked. That I report to this board, I said. Not to HR. Term 12 months, $850,000 total, milestone payments tied to audit results. Non-disparagement mutual. No gag orders on whistleblowing. And one more thing, which is, if the policy saves more than it costs, the first $1 million in savings funds a transition program for those 80 who were cut. Training, placement, real help. We move from revenge to repair. Clara laughed once. It sounded like a spoon striking glass. That's not how this industry works. Then that's why we keep losing people who keep it working, I said. They asked me to step out. I waited in a narrow hallway with tasteful art and a plant that had to try very hard under the lighting choice. My phone pinged from unknown you won, Porter. Don't get cute. I stared until the edges of the message blurred. It's funny how bullies sound smaller when they abbreviate themselves. The door opened. The chair beckoned. You'll have your authority, he said. And the program? I asked. He paused. It was the kind of pause accountants take when they realize the numbers have opinions. We'll fund it. 1 million as proposed. Don't make us regret it. I don't do regret, I said. I do documentation. You want the montage where the team changes the world? Fine. It looked like Saturday mornings at 6:30, coffee that tasted like a burnt apology, whiteboards, a small table where 3 of us, the compliance board rep, outside counsel, and me, wrote a policy not like scripture but like code you intend someone hostile to read. We piloted the employee impact review in 2 departments. We added a field that forced managers to describe work streams in words humans understand. We flagged any case where the score variance over 6 months exceeded 15%, meaning the person had been improving and the only thing they were guilty of was living in time. We trained 41 managers. We stopped 2 pending layoffs because an audit's timing would have made them illegal. We found 9 cases where a temp KPI had been used like a guillotine. We lifted it back onto its stand and told it to behave. Then came the second public reckoning, a town hall but quieter. The board wanted it on Teams Live. HR wanted it on a day people had meetings. I wanted it where the camera angles were honest. We compromised on a Thursday. I stood at the lectern with V3.0 on the screen and the internal use only stamp replaced by one that read, Adopted 614. I spoke the way you speak to people who've been lied to too many times. Numbers give us speed, I said. Speed is wonderful until it becomes a cliff. For 80 of our colleagues, it did. We can't rewind, but we can redraw the road. Policy V3.0 is not a shield for executives. It's a seatbelt for everyone else. I walked them through the rules. No layoffs during an audit. No permanent actions from provisional metrics. Mandatory 3 reviewer panels. Documented job relatedness. Adverse impact checks with math even I jealoused over. I used examples that were ugly but instructive. Why should we trust you? Someone asked from the chat, anonymous or brave. You wrote the report they used to cut us. You're right, I said. I wrote models designed to protect people with context. Then those protections were removed. I built a door and someone took off the lock. V2.3 was me putting the lock back. V3.0 is me building the door frame in steel. The feed didn't explode with hearts. It rarely does. But the messages changed from insults to questions, which is how civilizations advance. Afterward, I stood at the side of the stage and looked down. Paper looks small after you make it law. The fluorescent stamp on my old V2.3 binder winked at me from my bag like a retired soldier. Janice found me before I could disappear. Not bad, she said. High praise, I said. She angled her head toward the back of the room. Clara stood there by the exit, the way an ice sculpture stands in a warm room. She walked up, measured me the way one measures a chessboard that had the audacity to play back. You got what you wanted, she said. I wanted people not to be butchered by metrics, I said. This is a start. You made me the villain, she said. You chose the role, I said, not unkind. I just wrote the script down. She looked past me at the screen, at policy V3.0, at her own face in the reflection of decisions. They're not renewing my contract, she said. You win, I shook my head. No, the policy wins. That's harder to break. For a second, I thought she might offer me a hand to shake, or an apology shaped like strategy. She did neither. She left the way some storms do, quietly after a great deal of damage. The lawsuit settled 9 weeks later. The company paid $1.8 million, not enough to fix 80 lives, but enough to admit wrong in a language corporations speak fluently. The $1 million we earmarked for the transition program became real money and not just a righteous idea. We hired a firm that placed 32 of the 80 in new roles within 4 months, funded certifications for 19, extended health coverage for 6 who needed it most. It wasn't redemption. It was repair. Sometimes that's the grown-up version. They asked me to stay after my 12 months. I told them I don't live anywhere forever that makes me useful by accident. I signed on for another year under a clause that said my work could be published, anonymized, as a case study. They worried about reputation. I worried about repetition. On a quiet Friday, I returned the last of my ID badges, the ones with contractor laminated in a font that performs humility. I took the elevator to the ground floor and walked through the lobby where security nods as if permission were a personality trait. I stopped at a table under a ficus that was doing its best. I pulled V2.3 out of my bag, the paper copy, the fluorescent stamp still ridiculous and perfect, and set it on the table. I traced the words internal use only with a finger, like a name on a stone. I'd thought about burning it. People like rituals that promise ash becomes forgiveness. But after all this, I'd learned something better than theater. I took the binder home. I framed the cover behind glass. When people come to my office now, clients with questions about ethics, managers with fear, founders with the geometry of urgency, they see it on the wall. A reminder that the right policy at the wrong time is a parable. We talk about timelines and guardrails, and why saving $3.2 million can cost you $1.8 million plus the price of becoming the place. People whisper about at conferences. Sometimes, they ask me why I didn't just blow the whistle on day one. I tell them the truth. Because I wanted a policy, not a headline. Headlines fade. Policies annoy people forever, which is how you know they work. On my last day on site, I took a walk through the floor where the layoffs had happened. The desks had new names. The plants were different, some already dying under inattention. I set a small note card under the base of a monitor, where only someone bored or cleaning would find it. I wrote in block letters, "Numbers or maps do not cancel towns I don't know who found it." I imagined someone rolling their eyes and tucking it into a drawer. But drawers are where policies begin. Drawers and emails and binders with stamps that say you're not ready and you are. At home, I watered the hardy plant that had outlived 2 apartments and 1 relationship. It has learned the trick of bending toward the light and pretending it was its idea. I slid the V2.3 frame a little to the left, so the afternoon sun would glance off the glass and make the words flare for a second. It does that sometimes. Internal use only turning briefly into internal use always. It's a cheap optical illusion. It still makes me smile. If you're waiting for a scream or a door slam or a dramatic walkout set to drums, you were watching the wrong channel. Revenge, when you do it right in an office, is ink and patience. It's measured in weeks, memos, and meetings that end on time. It's policy. I rewrote the rules. Now they do the shouting for me. In offices like ours, power hides in memos, and justice hides in patience. If you've ever been blamed for doing the right thing, or watched rules bend until they broke someone else, you already know how this story feels. Subscribe to Revenge at the office. Because sometimes the cleanest revenge is just rewriting the rules.